to the system, if that were possible?
Well, I guess, you don't want to kind of increase the values dramatically without having offsetted changes. I mean, basically, if you went to a value based on sales, market values would go up. So the issue is, how can you kind of offset that? I mean, there's two layers of questions. You can, sometimes we look at it, like a hypothetical. What if you've created a new tax class, put all the co-op and condos in the same class, value them all based on sales, apply a total effective tax rate, a uniform effective tax rate? In some sense, that would be an issue of redistributing the burden among that group of properties.
Since you suggested it, let me play with the hypothetical. If you did merge into two classes, a residential and a commercial class, and you use sales or market, and then you used circuit breaker types on the back end to make policy decisions on those who you want to gradualize increases or those who you wanted to protect based upon public policy concerns. Do other jurisdictions implement that type of model?
I think other jurisdictions can vary a lot. I think some jurisdictions do have one, and we're also somewhat unique in the number of co-ops and condominium buildings we have. I think a lot of jurisdictions do have at least the concept of fair market value. The issue is the practice. Like, assessment practices vary from Y to Y. But your fundamental question, that's one model, that you try to create one class with all the residential properties and create some baseline uniformity, and then decide what targeted relief you want to have for different subgroups within it.
Is that approach under consideration by the Office of the Mayor?
Look, that's an issue that gets debated internally, because there are the political issues of, again, the winners and losers. So I would say that we do those kind of studies, and we do kind of look at it internally. I'm not going to comment. It's not like, as I mentioned, there's no proposal about to come out that's a legislative proposal. Part of it is just understanding the lay of the land, and part of it is the extra layers the other assembly member raised, that you can have an aggregate result, but how it plays out from neighborhood to neighborhood is very important.
Look, there's no such thing as perfect fairness. It's a system that's more fair, and I would enjoy being invited to some of those internal debates, although that's probably not forthcoming, in seeing what the approach would be. I know, to Chairwoman Gale's question, you answered that there's nothing forthcoming this year. But my hope is, my belief is that this type of wholesale reform is necessary, but it's necessary not by individual legislators as much as we may believe a certain course of action is ready. It's really incumbent upon the City of New York, as the abatement that we pass in rote, part of that abatement that we pass every 3-4 years, sets forth that the City of New York should come forth with a comprehensive plan on reforms and changes. And I'm not blaming this administration. Every administration has been dilatory in not following through on that. But that is the essence of the problem, is that you take out one, you address 581 without addressing everything else. You leave the city with a loss, or to make up that loss, you have to make it up from somewhere else. And that you can't do, because the City of New York relies on this property tax like no other tax it gets. So we await that comprehensive reform, and we want to work with the city. I know your deputy commissioners, not deputy mayors. That's part of a political decision that has to be made, but I think that's what a lot of us are looking for, is that type of holistic approach to how you want to reform the system. My fear, as my first question said, is it's better to do it how the city would like to do it, rather than be forced to under a special master ruling the system unconstitutional, requiring you to come to Albany within 60 or 90 days to do it. That is the absolute worst way to try and address a fix in the property tax system. Just a couple more. Look, just briefly, if you can describe transitional mechanisms, how they work, and what are the effects of using them for some tax classes and not others?
Right, I didn't mention in my testimony, but for the Class 2 that's greater than 10 units, and for Class 4 properties, there are what are called transitional assessments, which means that for changes that are due to market forces, they do get phased in for over a 5-year period. And the point is to try to blunt the impact of any year-over-year change. So in one sense, it does provide some near-term relief. It's meant that eventually the value does get reflected on the rolls over 5 years, so it is a mechanism. Caps sometimes can lead to, the revenues, the assessed value never being made up. So the idea with transitionals is there's a period of making a gradual change to the new system or to the higher value, but it was not like there is a period when it is going to be reflected on the rolls. Physical changes like new construction or renovations go on immediately, the assessed value related to the change. It's really to prevent abrupt changes because of market forces.
The net effect, though, is certain, you're not able to catch certain taxable amounts because of the existing caps. I mean, I don't want to just target Class 1, but it also exists.
Well, it does phase in over time. It becomes more of a rolling average. So you have 5 years of transitional assessments. They do phase in eventually. It's just it's a more gradual approach to get to the impact of the market value change. Whereas with caps, if the market's growing over time, sometimes you'll never, the 6% increase. I mean, the problem with the caps also, which creates confusion, is if you're, what'll happen is you have a target assessment ratio for Class 1 of 6%. Market value rises at a higher rate, so the real ratio of your assessed value to market value may be 3 or 4%. Then the market goes down, and say you have a loss in your home value when your assessed value is still going to go up because it's always trying to get to that 6% level. So with the transitionals, it's more of a kind of a rolling average of the assessed value going in over 5-year streams.
And in some of your earlier answers to the Assemblyman's questions, you talked about getting even, you have to look borough, not even borough by borough, community by community within borough. Is your computer mapping programs, do you have the ability to really get that data so granular in?
Well, there will be estimates because we do estimates of what like sales-based values would be for co-ops and condos. So to the extent we can get it down to a neighborhood level, we'll share the information. And so we think that they will give you a portrait of what's going on. They won't be precise at a parcel level, but they will give you a good distributional sense of what's going on.
And last question, do you have a recommendation for reducing the variability in effective tax rates? And do you think if reducing the variability, would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's the best system is to have uniform treatment for similar type properties. The rub is always if the market can be, the real estate market goes up, it goes down. How do you protect people in times of increases from having too abrupt changes in their AVs? As you recommended, the one approach is to look at circuit breakers or look at various types of mechanisms that can protect the population that you believe truly needs to be protected, but then keep the valuation and assessed value mechanisms as pure as you can.
Do other large cities in the United States use that approach?
Well, there are circuit breakers used in a number of jurisdictions. One thing I'll just caution is maybe just because we're tax administrators is when you look at values, it varies a lot, but there are a lot of jurisdictions that have problems with their values. They don't do annual assessments. So you could say you have a fair market value standard, but the real reality is what's truly being done at the ground level. But yes, I'd say throughout the country there are a lot of jurisdictions that use fair market values as the standard, and then there are jurisdictions that use circuit breakers.
Thank you very much.
So you feel you are at 100% evaluation on your properties?
100% compared to, I'm sorry.
90, 80?
I'm sorry, what do you measure?
No, I'm just, you said other communities do not keep up to date.
I think one thing that's highlighted this, I think we've made great improvements in how we do our valuation. It is restricted by what the law allows us to do. So we do spend a lot of time, for example, with the rental comparables, trying to find the most reasonable and accurate comparables. Part of that also is what's going to stand up in court. So again, the issue with the high-end condos, there's just an issue of how many rentals are truly comparable to a condo selling for greater than $10 million. And then there's also the issue of, even if we try to just pick the highest rents in the city and just apply it, will it withstand in court? Is that truly a comparable? Because comparables also are location-driven, physical, attributes of a property. So we spend a lot of time, and I think we have made a lot of improvements, and we do a very good job of applying the law, and we do annual valuations, and we have bolstered our assessor staff and part of it is a lot of data collection. So, we have a lot of staff out in the field trying to gather the data about the parcels, but we're still left with valuing according to the law.
Mm-hmm. Right. Ed Bronstein?
First, let me thank you for your patience, and I want to say the Department of Finance has always been accessible and willing to reach out and answer our questions, so I appreciate it. I thank Sandy and the rest of the committee for allowing me to come here and speak. I represent Northeast Queens. We've met before, and we've spoken about this before. I represent Northeast Queens. My assembly district is about half single-family homes and about half co-ops, middle-class co-ops. I would say a lot of seniors on fixed incomes, young families just starting out. And I understand, being that I represent half single-family homes, I understand the political difficulties of making wholesale changes to the property tax system. I'm joined today just by Bob Friedrich, who's the president of the President's Co-op Council in Northeast Queens. Just to show you how important an issue this is to us, our councilman, Barry Grodenchik, was here earlier, and he's been speaking to the mayor about the importance of these issues. In 2011, especially in Northeast Queens, it was a glaring example of the problem with not having caps on assessments for owner-occupied co-ops and condos. We saw one co-op in Northeast Queens, Crider Point in Whitestone, that the assessment went up 147% from 2010 to 2011. Now, when you consider the fact that single-family homes, they have assessment caps at 6% a year, 20% over 5 years, and we see with co-ops, which is usually lower income people. I mean, the single-family homes in my district, they sell for around $650,000 average. You could get a co-op for around $200,000. They're seeing an assessment of 147%, while single-family homes are only seeing 6%. We've proposed, because we understand the difficulties of wholesale changes, we've proposed a 6% cap on assessments for co-ops, 20% over 5 years, or even 8% cap, 30 over 5 years. And we've had some feedback from the Department of Finance that has said that that's even revenue neutral. Are you open to still considering that to provide equity to similarly situated families?
I think if one thing I was wanting to make sure, if we did give you the data that you asked for, if not, we can certainly follow up to make sure you get that. I think that would be part of the discussion we're talking about. How does it fit into the bigger picture? But certainly comparisons of co-op and condos to homes is a key part of it. But if you do caps, then you do kind of rate other issues of how do you maintain, horizontal equity going over time.
Well, if it's revenue neutral, you retain horizontal equity.
I meant as far as, again, one of the things with caps is it does treat different neighborhoods differently depending on rates of market value growth compared to assessed value growth. But to get back to your initial question, I think it's something that we can follow up on. I can't right here commit that in isolation is something that, we're going to support per se, but I think you're raising a valid point about how do you kind of protect certain subsets and how do you feed it into bigger reform issues.
Because you're a senior on fixed income in Northeast Queens. Your pension's not going up that much every year. Your Social Security's not going up that much every year. And then you see a 147% increase in your assessment from year to year. That's a huge hit in your maintenance. And that could force some people out looking for, other forms of housing because they can't afford to stay in their homes. And I know the mayor's made a big priority about affordable housing. And if this is a perfect opportunity in a possibly revenue-neutral way without dismantling the entire property tax system to provide fairness. I know Councilman Grodenchik was just here. He said he's spoken about it with the mayor. I'm just asking you to really consider it. It's something that I think will provide stability. People can budget. They can have surety of how much their maintenance is going to increase from year to year. And this is something that we've been pushing for, and I'm going to continue to push for it. The other proposal that I've had in the past, and we've made some changes with the Bloomberg administration, was changes to the abatement. The last time we extended the abatement for another 4 years, we removed the abatement from units that weren't owner-occupied. So if someone had an investment property or they had a second home, those folks would no longer get the abatement. I represent North Shore Towers, which is a large complex. A lot of those folks are snowbirds. They primarily live in Florida. They were a little upset because their home in New York is their second home. But, for the purposes of property tax abatement, it should be for somebody's primary residence. So we did make those changes, and we were able to increase the abatement for lower value units. I think they were somewhere around $500,000 market value or below. I don't know the assessed value. considering the fact that in higher wealth neighborhoods, there's a more disparity in the effective property tax rates in the co-op and condo area, I'm proposing perhaps that for units that are over $1 million in market value, perhaps we can, next time we do the extended abatement, if we no longer need to give someone who has $1 million or $2 million home, who's already generally paying much lower effective property tax than single-family homeowners or homeowners in more middle-class areas, perhaps we can curb back on the abatement for those folks and increase the abatement for lower value units like we did the last time we did the extender. Once again, this is something that's not dismantling the whole property tax system. This is something that's creating fairness for lower wealth, lower income people. And it's a proposal that I have. I mean, we're obviously not doing the abatement extender this year, but it's definitely something that when we do get to doing the abatement extender, if we have thought about it beforehand and perhaps planned ahead, we can make changes to that abatement that will provide more fairness in the property tax system. So those are two proposals I have. Like I said, I understand the difficulty and the politics. That's why we've had the same system for 35 years. But I think those are, reasonable, achievable ways to provide fairness. I'm just asking you to consider it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Assemblyman Rozak?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did I say Assemblyman? Did I say that?
You did.
I did. I can't believe
Okay.
it. Assemblywoman.
I get that sometimes. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the rest of the committee. I don't actually sit on real property tax as a committee, but it's obviously of interest to many of my constituents out in Eastern Queens, and it's actually great that I went after my great colleague, Assemblyman Braunstein, because I can just say ditto to much of what he said. I represent a very similar district, many single-family homes, many co-op and condo owners as well, and recent stories about the accumulation of foreign and non-resident ownership in residential real estate has really piqued my interest in particular, because it's housing that serves its owners as a pied-à-terre and not necessarily as their actual home. And it really points to how outdated our property tax system is, and perpetuates this inequality that benefits wealthier against the more middle-class, stable housing that we experience out in Eastern Queens. I'm not even going to get into tax abatement systems because I think Assemblyman Braunstein handled that pretty well. But I would just like to say, or get some sort of commitment from Department of Finance and the city to come out to Eastern Queens and see really what's going on at the ground level, and to have that conversation with actual constituents and actual organizations that are dealing with this every single year. I have workshops in my office about property tax assessments, and they're packed. Why? Because people just don't understand or have a lack of information from Department of Finance.
So I know that we participate in those workshops with your office. My staff have went to one recently, and we appreciate that you always organize them so that we can go out there. We're happy to come out there when you want to have us so that we can continue to speak with your constituents, make sure they get the exemptions they qualify for, hand out our property tax guides, answer questions. We mentioned in our testimony that we have public workshops all around the city. After they're in February every year, the Tax Commission comes with us, which is an independent agency where people can challenge their values as well. So, we're happy to continue to work with you to get to your constituents in the ways that make sense.
And then just to follow up on something that was said before, when you're talking about mapping out the parcels and going neighborhood by neighborhood specifics, I represent Queens College. They have a whole office of demographics and people who work on this every single day. So I would encourage you to reach out to them and get more of the neighborhood by neighborhood data that they already have.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I just, this really gets into the heart of the issue when there are two issues I wanted to ask you about, but it's kind of like another tax exemption. One was Superstorm Sandy, and trying to, because a lot of properties, once they rebuilt, were taxed or assessed at a higher level. You know, and this is where nothing is ever clear, I guess. How is that going? Have we completed the process and the assessment? What's going on with that in New York City?
Tim, you want to talk about that?
There still remain homes that have not been rebuilt or repaired. I think it's going pretty well in terms of those homeowners that have repaired their homes. Their assessment could not have increased more than at the rate of assessment greater than it was pre-Sandy.
Right.
So we have not had negative feedback from homeowners who have repaired their homes.
Okay. And the other is in the area which it was legislation that came through our committee about green roofs, and you could talk about environmental issues. How is that program going? Again, that's help with people who are doing something environmentally good. Is it a program that's working at all in New York City? And are you going to do anything in the area of solar? You know, trying to meet the governor's request of 50% renewable sources by what,
2030.
2030? Is anything happening there? And I know all of that deviates from once we would do all these things, it's another tax exemption, but they are there. Could you just explain a little bit about the environmental aspect?
Those are good questions. I don't know, do you have data available? I think we'd have to get back to you.
Anything going on?
Over there? Very good, you have the big book.
I actually thought that Linda Rosenthal might be here and she would ask that question.
So this is for last fiscal year. We're coming out in February with our report for this fiscal year. This is our tax expenditure report that's publicly available. The green roof abatement, well, it was just passed last year, so we don't have data on that yet, but we should have data within a month or so. The solar abatement, the number of exemptions and abatements was 1,285 households. That was for last fiscal year.
When you say households, could that be an apartment?
I think, can co-ops and condos get it, or is it the building?
I thought it was residential.
I think it's just homes.
Just homes, individual homes. Okay. Right. So you're really not into the business yet, I guess.
I think the green roof is a little slow so far. I mean, anecdotally, but we could get you the specific.
Yeah, okay. My colleague, again, has some more questions.
Once again, thank you. And thank you for answering to the best of your ability. And I'm sure that we have much to follow up on. I want to bring up 2 quick points. One, it's been brought to my attention that Class 1s, 1 to 3 families, that there is, even in that category, there is a misclassification of one-family homes that may have had a finished basement that are being taxed as a 2-family.
I'm not sure it still be within Class 1, but Tim, do you want to talk about valuation?
Well, 1, 2, and 3-family homes are all taxed the
The
same.
market value of that property now as a 2-family versus a 1-family would be different.
We find that in most neighborhoods, 1 and 2-family homes sell for around the same price.
What about 2 and 3-family?
Because it's easily convertible. These homes are easily convertible. So depending on, I'm sure there are certain neighborhoods in which it matters, in which there are changes in value, but generally, we can say that 1 to 3-family homes are sold in the same neighborhood, all sell relatively for the same value.
I'd like to know what neighborhood that refers to. Every neighborhood I know that has a 1-family home sells completely different from a 2 or a 3, but we'll leave that one.
Neighborhood is that?
But is this a correct assessment that it's been known to have 1-family homes with a finished basement be taxed as a 2-family, or a 2-family home with a finished basement to be taxed
It
as a
shouldn't.
3-family?
I'm not saying it never happens, but it shouldn't. And as I said, I don't think it has a significant difference in value. It doesn't really impact value.
Okay.
I would just add to that, you know, we were talking about the notices of property value that we mail to every parcel in the city, and we also post those to our website. if a homeowner gets one of those notices and sees that we have the wrong information about their property, we want them to come to us at this time of year to tell us, like, hey, you guys are saying that I have 2 units in my house. I really only have 1 unit, so that we can make sure that our what we have is accurate in our records.
Well, what'll happen more than likely is when they see 2 units, they'll assume that that second apartment is legal and not even be aware that their single largest investment is in jeopardy because they have an illegal apartment, and that, God forbid, of an incident that not even, their insurance may not even cover. But that's a different issue. Can you tell me how we tax Class 2 properties when they're mixed use, so you have residential over a commercial store?
We still value those by the income approach. It's just that you have additional income from the retail component. So it's the rental income from the residential component in addition with the income from the retail component.
Same tax rate?
Same tax rate.
In-
If it's in tax
formula-
class 2, yes.
And that would mean that a store, there is no tax difference between, in your calculations of market value based on income, between residential and commercial?
Well, generally, it's a tax class 2 parcel with a store will probably be valued greater than its counterpart without a store.
So if incomes were the same between 2 properties, one had a store, one didn't, income is the same, would they be valued the same, or you're saying no because of the commercial property?
If the net income is the same, they will be valued the same.
Okay, so commercial, there is no
If-
difference, it's just income-based, and there's no
It's income-based.
assessment.
We're just saying that the commercial unit might have higher income per square foot, but if it's the same income, it would be valued the same. If they had a higher value because the retail component had a higher income stream, then that
If
would-
there's a higher income stream, obviously your tax rate, your tax consequence will be higher based on your income.
Right, but if it's the same net income, it would be treated the same.
Which then goes back to the mom and pop shop, the commercial corridors that we have that make our city so vibrant, would pay a unfair tax burden because they fall in the Class 2 properties. So we put a
Well-
burden on those commercial stores.
Those
That-
are in a subclass of tax class 2, which I guess we haven't articulated. There are 2As and 2Bs. The 4 to 10 unit apartment buildings that are mixed use. Those are capped at 8% a year and 30% over a 5-year period.
I think you just said that there's no difference if it's a residential building with a commercial.
You have residential buildings with more than 10 units. We said from the outset in the testimony, class 2, pure class 2, are more than 10 units in an apartment building. You have a subclass 2, which represents 4 to 10 unit properties.
So in a commercial corridor in a lot of the boroughs where you have a retail, you have a restaurant, you have a store, and then you have, say, 3 units above it, that's going to be classified as one of our smaller Class 2 properties, which means it has that protection of the assessed value can't go up 8% from 1 year to the next or 30% over 5 years, versus a large residential building, say a big co-op or condo building that has a retail or a child care center, something underneath it, where it has a lot of units above it, that's going to be valued differently.
Okay, but that tax burden is then a larger building, more than 20 units, with a commercial tenant on the first floor would pay a higher tax rate.
Now, they pay the same
Same tax rate, higher tax
A higher tax.
dollar amount.
If the income.
Because of assessment
Their
based on
income.
income, correct?
Right.
Okay, and we go back to my earlier assessment, that Class 2 is paying its more than fair share and subsidizing other classes. So we're putting that same financial burden, pass along, onto the pizzeria, your local nail salon, your bakery, or whatever it may be, in the form of a real estate tax bill that's passed on from the property owner to that store owner.
Well, the mom and pop stores are also, their assessments are capped, again, 8% a year and 30% a year. So I don't know if you want to compare their burden similar to other Class 2 properties that are more than 10 units.
More than 10 units, or less than 10 units, we go back to the Class 2, tax rate is higher.
I mean, just,
Yes?
you're looking at 2 compared to 4, or what's?
2 compared to 1. Let's go back to my early argument about tax. Class 2 properties are paying more than their fair share of the overall real estate tax collection. Yes?
We're going to get back to you with the data that you requested so that you can take a look and see what it looks like to you, because we have to get that data for you.
But it's
so
a general
that you can
question.
see.
If Class 2 properties are paying, what was the number that you're using? 36% of the overall real estate tax revenue, when their worth is $23.5 billion, correct? 23.5% of the total market value. That would also mean that if they have a commercial tenant, regardless if they're 10 units, under 10, or more than 50, that tax is then placed on that store, on that tenant.
And I hate to repeat some error, but this is where we do need to get back to, because part of the issue we've been trying to make is that comparison of 23% market value for Class 2 to the levy share is again, this issue of a little bit apples to oranges. It's not, we need to look at this stuff using a common understanding of what market values are. So we're going to try to get you at what most people know as fair market value. You know, what do things sell for in the marketplace at arm's length transactions? Because these kind of comparisons, we're acknowledging that our market values aren't truly reflective of fair market values. So that kind of statement we don't think it's necessarily correct. It could be that in individual neighborhoods what you're saying is correct, but I think it's going to vary by areas, and I think you need to see the kind of data you asked for.